But before I get to those questions, I need to talk about a few things. And I'm going to start with the record breakers of the tournament. Of course, the Korean players, An Se-young, Seo Seung-jae, and Kim Won-ho. All of them set some pretty remarkable records this week as they won the entire competition. I already mentioned that before. An Se-young won the women's singles, and Kim Won-ho and Seo Seung-jae won the men's doubles. So I'm going to start with An Se-young. 11 titles in a calendar year. So that means that she's equaled the overall record. There's a few players that have this. Ken Tomomota is probably the most famous example, most recent one. He won 11 titles in a calendar year in 2019. An Se-young has now matched that record, and that's obviously a record for women's singles. She beat her own record from, was it last year, when she won 10 titles. So maybe next year, 12. Who knows? Not only that, but she became the first player to win over $1 million in a calendar year. Now, that's an impressive stat. I'm not sure whether to look at that as impressive or to go, bloody hell, badminton isn't particularly well paid. I did mention at the start that the World Tour Finals have a really nice purse of $3 million, with each winner kind of almost getting $250,000. That's nothing to sniff at. I'd love to be able to come away from a week's work with $250,000, but it just goes to show that someone who has won 11 titles, and majority of those are the biggest titles in our sport, has only just made $1 million. And if any of you watch, on the Netflix shows about the tennis or even the golf, a golfer can win one of those tournaments it's their high level, but the lowest on the PGA, and you see their earnings come up on the screen. It's like won 3.6 million. And you're like, that's 1 week. That's one tournament. Whereas An Se-young's battled through 14 tournaments, winning 11 of them, and is only just scraped over $1 million. I know we can't compare, but it's just a little bit depressing at times. But badminton is, like I said at the start, moving in the right direction. But that wasn't the only record that An Se-young set. She also finished the year with the best win-loss percentage record by any player in badminton who has played more than 60 matches in a year. That's quite an important distinction, that, because there are a few players from the 90s that have finished the year with a 100% record, but the amount of tournaments or matches they used to play back then was pretty much half that. They'd play 20, 30, 40 at an absolute stretch. But An Se-young finished the year with 94.73% win-loss percentage record. The number 2 spot, I think, is shared between Lee Chongwei and Lin Dan. Lin Dan's 2011 year and Lee Chongwei's 2010 year, and they finished at like 92.75. So, and I think An Se-young played more matches than them as well. So that shows you how impressive, how dominant she has really been. And the crazy thing is that I think I heard that Park Ju-bong was interviewed about An Se-young, and he still was a little bit disappointed because she wasn't able to win the World Championships. So it just shows you the kind of, standards that someone like Park Ju-bong sets. But it's a fair comment as well, because if you've been that dominant, why weren't you able to deliver it at the Worlds as well? Especially when she'd already won that title, which she won in 2023. But I'm not going to bully her for that. It's still, what a fantastic year for her. And let's bring it round to these World Tour Finals. She did it the hard way, because let's not forget, that final that she played with Wang Zhiyi was brutal badminton. It was similar in ways to the All England final they played this year, but the dynamic between it was slightly different. The flow of the match was certainly different, because if you remember the All England, Wang Zhiyi came out absolutely blasting, and I know An Se-young, I think, was a little bit under the weather, not at full fitness, but Wang Zhiyi for a game and a bit was fully in control. It looked like it was going to be her tournament, but An Se-young found a way to grind it out, and grind it out she did, coming back in that second and then grinding out the third. Here in this final, it was An Se-young that took the first game pretty comfortably on the scorelines, and then was pegged back. And in the third, it wasn't close, but that was because it really was a war of attrition, and it was who's going to crack first. And at the crucial stages, it was Wang Zhiyi that just didn't quite have enough. It almost ended for An Se-young, because I think when she got to about 17 or 18, and she'd been showing signs of this throughout, she was cramping, and in the last point, almost couldn't walk over the line. It was, luckily she had like 10 match points, because it finished 21-10. I did feel, like I said, it was a battle in that third of who could handle more pain, as many times they were bent over, both players shaking out their legs. I mentioned An Se-young did finish the match with cramp, and one thing you want to know how hard it was is when they were walking off the court. An Se-young had a cooling spray, and she passed it to Wang Zhiyi, almost going, you need some of this as well. Both players gave it absolutely everything. It was full court badminton, classic singles tactics, but there were a few other things that I noticed as well. Some tactical elements. In the first game, I felt An Seong was in the mood to absorb as much as possible. I'm not sure whether she expected or anticipated Wang Zhiyi to come out a little bit more aggressive. Probably because that's the way that whenever she's been able to go to 3 games with An Seong or even beaten her in the past, it has been playing very, very sharp, very, very, well, I wouldn't say very, very attacking badminton, but definitely more attacking minded. So I think An Seong, maybe she was almost letting her, but it was like, okay, I'm in a real mood. I'm going to absorb everything, try and kind of knock the wind out, take the legs out a little bit of Wang Zhiyi, go, right, you're playing really fast, really sharp, but you're not getting an advantage out of this. Adding not only physical pressure, because that's incredibly difficult to do, because if there's one thing An Seong's really good at is, and it happened here in this match, is Wang Zhiyi was working really, really hard, but An Seong has a really good way of allowing you to do that, but not working as hard herself. She still does. Clearly, it was an incredibly brutal match. But for example, Wang Zhiyi was trying to punch her clears, punch her lifts, do the sharp stuff, and An Seong, if she was slightly late, would just give it a little bit more height. So when Wang Zhiyi was hitting onto her, come fast, and then An Seong would send it back slow, just absorbing, giving herself that little bit of time. But I did think when I was watching it going, I think An Seong's going to do this to a point, try and take some of the legs out, and then we'll see her go in and play a little bit more of the more proactive, taking the initiative kind of style that we have seen a little bit more of her in the latter stages of this season. And she kind of did that in the opening game. Another thing that I noticed, and I kind of already mentioned it, but it was that Wang Zhiyi was really punching her shots, her opening shots, to kind of, you know, create small chances or chances where she could anticipate better and apply even more pressure. The hard thing for her, though, was that if she's not 100% ready to kind of pounce on any small chance, when I say pounce, I don't mean like you jump in and kill it. I mean, you're just there that little bit quicker, so then you can apply more pressure on the next shot and get that little bit more ahead again. If you miss one of those opportunities, An Seong's so good at sending the rally back to 0. So if we see it as they start the rally here, Wang Zhiyi does one of those punch shots, and then if it's slightly late and she can get that chance, she can go up here. That's it. If she gets another chance, then she'll try to get another chance here. This is how gradual it must be. But the problem and the difficulty is, and I think this might be why An Seong still has beaten Wang Zhiyi now 8 times this year, is that if Wang Zhiyi misses one chance, it isn't like it goes down one level. It almost drops back to where it started. An Seong's so good that if you give her a small chance, even when you've applied lots of pressure, her quality of shot's so good, she can almost start the rally and get it back to 50-50, get it back to a completely neutral rally. And can you imagine the psychological pressure that will put on you? But to be fair, Wang Zhiyi was able to sustain that pressure much better than she has earlier in the year. I think it's the first time that she took An Seong to 3 games in quite a while. I can't remember the last time they actually went to 3. In fact, a number of the last times they played, it's been quite straightforward. And that just goes to show that if Wang Zhiyi is not in that physical top shape or playing really well, that she just can't get that little advantage that she needs. Those little layers, each shot just trying to get that a bit more. Too often she might get 1 or 2 levels up and then she'll just drop back down, up, down, up, down. And then An Seong's also good at getting the advantage herself. It is very, very difficult. And that's why it became such a physical battle, because I think both players were acutely aware of what was going on. And like I said, the third game, for me, when I was watching it, I was watching going, who's going to crack first? Both were exhausted. Both were bending over the kit box or hands on the knees. And so it's going to be who would crack. And obviously it was Wang Zhiyi. But I think one thing An Seong also did quite smartly in that third game was she actually went on the attack. And I'm sure it was hard for her because it would have been, she was physically exhausted. And that's probably why she also cramped up, is that to maintain a little bit more control, because I said Wang Zhiyi was her starting shot that you would usually open the rally for her would be a punch clear. An Seong started to give her less time to be able to do that, taking on the initiative so that An Seong could then control the rallies far better. And not only that, but she was also being granted with some good attacking opportunities to finish the rallies and win some of her own points. And I just think Wang Zhiyi, if she wanted to continue the tactic that was clearly working, was going to have to work even harder. And she just simply didn't have that. You could almost see it in her eyes at times, like, wow, this is just this. I don't think I'm going to be able to win this. And I think that's why when the match ends, I know in the press conference she got emotional. she was the defending champion. It is on home soil. But I think it's a little bit of like, I gave absolutely everything. I've given absolutely everything out. That was a really good opportunity for me to beat Unsung, and I still can't beat her. It must be quite soul-destroying for her, in all honesty. But I want to finish this little section because I've sung Unseong's praises, and there's endless the amount you can do that. But I do want to kind of sing the praises of Wang Zhiyi as well, because I think she often gets overlooked, especially this year, as a couple of reasons for that. She didn't do well at the World Championships. She lost to PV Sindhu early. She hasn't beaten Unseong at all this year. She's played it 8 times and lost every single time, and the majority of those were rather one-sided. And also, on top of that, we've seen a resurgence from other women's singles players. Ratchnok Intanon is actually an example of a popular player, so she's going to get lots of attention. Akane Yamaguchi's another popular player, and she won the World Championships and also beat Unseong. And because Unseong barely lost this year, any player that was able to beat her definitely gets attention. And I think more specifically for Wang Zhiyi, Chen Yufei's return. She's the only player to defeat Unseong more than once this year. And I just think that's put Wang Zhiyi in the shadows because, Steen said that she had improved a lot this year, and I think she has. She's definitely growing and growing. She's young. Let's not forget that. And she's continuing to develop. Plus, her own consistency this year has been tremendous. I think she's the most consistent women's singles player behind Unseong. She is the world number 2. Let's not forget that. She's played 8 times against Unseong, and seemingly as both of them have been, I think, world number 1, world number 2 all year. Those are 8 finals. Actually, no, one of them I think was in the Sudirman Cup, but still, 7 of those must have come in finals of tournaments. That just shows how many. And I know that Wang Zhiyi has also won a couple of titles. So we're looking at a player that's probably reached 10 finals this year, which is an absolutely extraordinary effort. But obviously, she just doesn't get talked as much as the other players and Unseong. So I wanted to quickly take this time before I get back to career, just to say that I think Wang Zhiyi deserves some credits. But like I said, back to career. Let's move on. Kim won her.